And welcome into the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. My name is Anthony Jeremiah. He does not feel well. He is out today. He will be back on Monday. All right. NFL released its schedule yesterday. You guys seem to care a lot about that. Care a lot about who team plays who, where they play, all the stuff like that. There's this big, giant, event for the whole thing, right? It's a whole big media spectacle where, ESPN and everybody else puts on this giant, just show where it's just hey, this team plays this team in week 5. Who do you think wins? Which, look, man, I love the NFL, right? I love the NFL as much as anybody else, right? I'm a fan, all that good stuff. Also, I don't care who plays in week 7. Now, with that being said, there are a couple of things that are interesting to look at. You kind of go from there. But the way it gets broken down, I saw stuff where it's they're judging what the record's going to be for the Dolphins and the Ravens and the Patriots and the Steelers and stuff like that. And it's hold on. Why? How do you know? Fine, we probably think the Patriots are going to be a good team and we presume the Browns are going to be a bad team because history, right? That's kind of how that works. So at least I get certain teams how you're going to predict the record, but the Ravens, do you have any idea how good they're going to be? No, you don't. Because, okay, let's just do it like this. Really quick, we'll just, do a random Google search of a team. Let's just do Tennessee Titans, right? The first team that popped into my head. If I do the Tennessee Titans schedule, right? If I Google that and you see what comes up, all of a sudden, all right, boom, cool. Now we're going to go to ESPN and we're going to look this up, and we're going to see the teams they're going to face, right? Now, if we go down the list of all the stuff like that, they start off with the Raiders, and they go to the Jaguars, Seattle, Houston, Miami, Indianapolis, Cleveland, right? That's the first 7 games before they get to a bye week. Cool. We're probably thinking that Cleveland's going to be a bad team. The Raiders were a good team last year. We're assuming the Jaguars are going to be a bad team. The Seahawks are probably going to be a good team. The Texans have a good defense. If we go through those 7 games, maybe they're, 3-4? But who knows? Maybe the Titans, because they have a really good quarterback in Mariota, all of a sudden they go 5-2, and now they're just, set up to be a playoff team. Nobody knows how this is going to be, right? It's the weirdest thing how, because the NFL is still king, right? As much as other sports like the NBA have tried to gain ground on it, and it probably has, the NFL is still king. The NFL is still the thing that we all care about, the thing that we want to watch, the thing that we want to basically dissect, because the best part about the NFL compared to these other sports like basketball or baseball or hockey or whatever is you have breaks, right? Baseball, it's every day. Every day there's going to be at least 10 games being played, right? And at a certain point that just kind of becomes monotonous, and you just see that the Cardinals won another game because Yadier Molina had a, base hit to the right, and all of a sudden they won the game. You don't care after a certain point. Even basketball, there's 82 games, right? You get basically one game every 2 or 3 days. You watch your team. Even if you love LeBron, you can basically check out for a good 2 months of the season and come back and be okay, what did I miss? Oh, LeBron's still great? Cool, good talk. The NFL, every game counts, right? It's 16 of them. You get it once a week. All you got to do is worry about Sunday. Yeah, you might have to worry about Thursday or Mondays, and then Saturday, I guess, at the end of the year. But you got to worry about one day. So I get how this whole thing has become this giant media spectacle where everybody is asking questions, everybody's doing all these things. They take Mel Kiper out of his cage of watching basically all these games from college. You basically have him and McShay sitting in some just random dungeon in the middle of the ESPN in Connecticut, and they're just watching tape on this offensive lineman out of just, Georgia that you've never heard of. They bring him up and say hey, schedule, what do you think? Oh, well, I think they can go 7-8 or 7-9, and then they shuffle them off. It's weird, but fine. You guys want to talk about this? Cool. Let's talk about it a little bit more. Now, there are a couple of things that are happening that are noteworthy, things that are interesting, make you kind of tilt your head huh, that's weird. One of them, the Oakland Raiders. Now, I say the Oakland Raiders because they're still the Oakland Raiders for right now. 2 years, they moved to Las Vegas. They become the Las Vegas Raiders. So there's 2 more years of them playing in Oakland. So that means 16 regular season home games, worst case scenario, right? If they never make the playoffs, 16 games, have 8 each year, have the fans come out, support them. Well, in November, on the 19th, the Patriots are heading to Mexico to play the Oakland Raiders in Azteca Stadium, November 19th at 4:25 Eastern Standard Time, so 1:25 on the West Coast. Patriots are going to play the Raiders in Mexico. So you take off another game for the Raiders, who are going to be there for a very short amount of time, and you're basically telling them, cool, all those 16 games was the best case scenario. You're not even getting that. We're taking you away. We're not letting you do that, which is just like a weird thing to do. Like, I understand the Raiders have moved from Oakland before to Los Angeles and then back to Oakland. I get that that's not the first time they've left, but I don't think, like, as weird as Mark Davis is, he's not Al. Like, Al Davis is one of the most insane owners you probably ever had in the history of sports. He would sue the NFL for fun. Literally, it was like a joy to him to basically sue the NFL and see what he can get out of it. But Mark's not that crazy, but he's got a little bit of his dad in him. He's got a little bit of the whole, like, yeah, I'll move the team, I don't care. And he's doing that, moving to Vegas. And I don't understand why, if you're the NFL, you would allow one of your most historic franchises, right? Because whatever you want to say about the Raiders over the past 10, 15 years being, a laughingstock, they've got 3 Super Bowls. And they've got some of the most historic players of all time. I mean, Tim Brown is one of the greatest wide receivers to ever play the game. Rich Gannon had an MVP season. You had Marcus Allen, Bo Jackson. You had people on those teams back in the 70s, 80s, 90s who were like really, really good players. You had Jerry Rice basically keep his career going for a few years here. Yeah, you had the black hole moments where it was not the best. Like, you bring in Warren Sapp, you bring in Randy Moss, you bring in people like that who aren't going to be contributors to the team when they were bad. But this is still a historically great franchise. This is 3 Super Bowls. That's as many as Washington has. That's as many as, I'm trying to think what other teams have 3 right now. That's more than the Miami Dolphins have. That's way more than the Bills, the Chiefs, the Jets. Like, that's a really historic franchise. And you're just kind of like letting them go and not caring, which seems really weird. A couple other things that are happening around the NFL as far as like games and where they're at. Jacksonville is making their, yearly pilgrimage over to England, because that's what they do. They're basically a team that plays in Jacksonville, and every now and then vacations. It's like their summer home, right? They just all of a sudden decide to leave, and they go across the pond to England. They're going to play the Baltimore Ravens. It's going to be a home game for Jacksonville, because of course it's going to be, because at this point the people in England are just like, oh, cool, we get to see the Jaguars again? Cool. I don't think they know the fact that the Jaguars aren't good. Like, I think if we got to see, like, an English Premier team come to the U.S. and play all the time, we'd be like, oh, cool, we get an English Premier League team. We wouldn't pay attention to it. We'd have no idea. We'd just be like, hey, football, America's game. Or not America's game. The beautiful game. The nationally most televised game in the world. Oh, this is great. We wouldn't pay that much attention to it. I don't think England pays attention that much to Jacksonville. But again, they're going to play there. But it's not just one game, because the NFL, for whatever you want to talk about them, they're not gluttonous by any stretch. No, of course not. They also are going to have on September 24th, Miami go and host New Orleans. In Week 7, the Rams, now LA Rams, are hosting the Cardinals, and Minnesota is going to be going against Cleveland. A couple of weird things with this whole thing. Miami's going again to New Orleans. Fine. Like, I get those things. I get the fact that the Jacksonville Jaguars go and the Miami Dolphins go, because both of them are in Florida on the East Coast, close enough to England. Like, it's still a long distance, but you're right on the coast. I get it. The Rams are going to be hosting the Cardinals. The Rams, the LA Rams, Los Angeles. That is like 6,000 miles. And they're going to be hosting the Cardinals, which, say what you will about the Cardinals last year, still had a pretty good defense. And you get Tyrann Mathieu back and Chandler Jones another year in the system, all this stuff combined. There's no guarantee at all that the Cardinals don't just mollywop the Rams, because also, do you remember the Rams? Remember Jared Goff? He was not very good. There's a very solid chance that they just get creamed when they get over there and play, because they got to travel 6,000 miles to where with the Cardinals, yeah, they got to travel a long distance too, but they're a better team. Like, this is going to be probably a defeat pretty good for the Rams. I just realized I'm kind of doing what I just kind of railed against. Like, I'm kind of breaking down the schedule. Whatever. It's fine. And then finally, the Vikings are going to Cleveland. Cleveland's probably going to lose because Cleveland. There's a couple other games that are kind of note. You got the Kansas City Chiefs starting off the regular season going against the New England Patriots. You have the Atlanta Falcons playing the New England Patriots again in a rematch of the Super Bowl. There are a handful of games that are good games, fun games. You're going to have your games. You're going to have the Washington, call them ours, go against the New York Giants, where you're going to have Odell Beckham go against Josh Norman. That's always going to be fun. That's always going to be exciting. And all in all, The NFL schedule is out. Fantastic. There is literally no way I can tell you what team is going to be good, what team is going to be bad. I could pick out a few games and be like, oh, that's fun, and oh, that's interesting. But as far as like actually being able to tell what it's going to actually be, as far as like, oh, I think this team goes 9-7, I have no idea. You have no idea. And if you think you actually have an idea of what's going to happen, you're lying to yourself because you just want to seem like you're right. To where myself, I understand things I'm not good at. I'm not good at predicting if team's going to be good or not because you know what? Last year, I was at the Dolphins have gone 6-10. They made the playoffs. It was a great year for them, all stuff considering. But, with that being said, we're going to take our first break. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about one of the guys that's going to be in the upcoming NFL draft, Reuben Foster. Talk about that when we get back to the GSMC Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. All right, so going from the pros and the schedule release and everybody being all happy about, oh my God, we get to see our teams play. Going back a little bit to college, we're going to go specifically to one player that had a very successful career at the University of Alabama as a linebacker, Reuben Foster. So Foster's one of those guys when he comes from the Alabama pedigree of, being one of the guys that you expect big things from because he comes from that Alabama system, that Nick Saban system, right? Dante Hightower has come from there, C.J. Mosley. People have come over there and been really successful players in the pros. So he was going to be a top 5, top 10, something like that pick. And, he's recovering from rotator cuff surgery. So there wasn't even a guarantee that he was going to, be ready for the OTA, stuff like that. He still had to recover and everything else like that. All he really had to do was go to the combine, show up, do some interviews, do some drug tests, basically play nice, and then after that get drafted high because your potential is so high. Well, he basically failed a drug test because there was a diluted sample when he went to the combine, and not only that, but there were reports that he was doing the whole do you know who I am thing, right? Kind of like feeling himself and pissing off the executives and GMs that are there because you're not taking the thing seriously and da-da-da. You can say what you will about someone like in a situation playing the do you know who I am card. I mean, Deion Sanders famously said, I'm going to request so much money they have to put me on layaway, and that's Deion Sanders. He's one of the greatest cornerbacks to ever play the game. You can be cocky and arrogant and brash, but you have to back it up after the fact, right? You can't be Matt Hasselbeck after the coin flip in overtime basically saying we're going to get the ball and we're going to win, and then you lose the game because you threw an interception, right? Those don't work. If you're going to be cocky, you got to back it up, and even then, it's not always the thing where we always forgive you for it. So for Foster, after he basically had the whole do you know who I am card, he then, like I said, failed a drug test. He had a diluted sample, which they then take as a positive test. Now, what he's saying is that he was dehydrated, he had to have a lot of fluids in him, drank a lot of water, basically saying that was the reason why these things happen. And fine, that could be the reason. Like, I'm not going to say it's not the reason, but also, come on, man, who are you trying to fool? Like, not only does that thing sound kind of fishy, we've heard all of those excuses before, right? Like, from basically 2005 to 2010, we had all these baseball people talking about how they did or did not test positive for all these performance-enhancing drugs, and it was anything from, someone poisoned me to, it's just B12 to, someone was just trying to set me up. Like, there's all these things that people have tried to say. And, could it be something as simple as he just had too much water or too much whatever, and then all of a sudden the sample is diluted? Sure. But the fact is, he failed the drug test, and now he's got to pay the consequences for that. The one thing with it is you can say anything you want to about, oh, well, he should be more mature as far as taking these interviews, or, oh, he shouldn't smoke marijuana, or he shouldn't have this diluted test. None of that's really the point. And what I mean by that is when you go to the NFL Combine, right, you know a few things. You know, one, especially if you're competing, like he wasn't competing, but if you're competing in there, you know there's a certain amount of things that you have to do well, right? If you're a wide receiver, the 40. You got to hit the 40. If you're a cornerback, same thing. If you're a lineman, you got to get the bench press good because if you're not strong, it doesn't really matter as much. You know, there's stuff like the cone drill and there's things like how high you can jump that matter, but it's just kind of also one of those things that's just like an extra kind of thing to like prove that you are a freak of nature, kind of like how Myles Garrett was doing and how he was basically flying through everything and looking great. It helps, but it's not as important, like I said, as a wide receiver's 40 time or a lineman's bench presses. But one of the most important things when you get there is the drug test. Because unlike the NFL, which do random drug tests, they literally tell you, yo, when you get here, we are going to test you. Because if you fail a drug test randomly, fine. Those things happen. Like, you shouldn't take the drugs, obviously. You know, kids don't do drugs. Like, you shouldn't do that. But at the same time, that happens, right? You slip up. You think you're not going to be tested, and all of a sudden, bam, weed man comes. Now you pop positive. But this is something that they literally tell you, like, hey, this is going to be this month. Maybe don't do anything for about a month and a half, 2 months beforehand. Get it out of your system kind of thing, right? It's a stupidity test at that point, right? Because if you can't actually stop it, it's one of two things. Either A, you don't care, or B, you have a problem. Either of which makes the NFL kind of like look at you sideways and be like, you knew exactly what we were going to do, and you still failed this test. You still messed this up enough to where you can't get right, to where even though you knew that this was coming, you still decided that it was a good idea to blaze up or to do whatever else like that, take the, you know, prescription drugs or whatever else it is. You still decided to do this. And that's the only problem that you know, the NFL generally has with these things. They don't generally care as much if you're someone that, like, smokes weed. You understand how much the NFL probably does smoke? How much the sports in general probably smokes weed? Like, if you do it, that's fine. Like, you know, just don't do anything that gets you caught. And now the thing with Reuben Foster is he's going to drop, which doesn't necessarily hurt him, right? Because, well, you would like to be a top 5 pick because of the money. If you're in, like, the middle rounds, you still get a lot of money. Obviously, it's going to be less because you're not as high of a pick. But then you're going to a better situation, right? Then you're going to a better team. Like, if you're in the top 5, 6, you're going to the Jets, you're going to the Jaguars, you're going to the Bears, teams that are really bad, right? But if you're in, like, the 15, 16, 17 range, then all of a sudden you get to go to the Ravens, right? Good structure, good organization. Maybe you flop down to, like, the 20th pick. All of a sudden Denver's there at number 20. Or even if you're, like, the 12th pick, right? Or not the 12th pick, the 11th pick with the New Orleans Saints. That's a good enough organization, right? You can kind of, like, be on a better team. So for Foster, the one thing that is the worst on all this is that now he's going to be in the drug program, right? Now he's in the program where they're going to test you more now. Now they're going to look at you sideways and be like, okay, I'm going to test you randomly here. Because if you go through the combine and everything's fine, then they kind of leave you alone, right? Then all of a sudden it's totally fine, and as long as you pass your one test, cool, you're good. Have fun throughout the rest of the year. I mean, every now and then they'll test you, like they'll test like Pat McAfee because he decided to basically like run down somebody on a punt return, or Adam Vinatieri made like a 55-yard field goal, and the NFL's like, that doesn't seem normal. Drug test. But, I mean, for the most part, if you pass the one test, they're going to let you live. And there's kind of like a test just to see if you can stop. Not if you don't smoke weed, but if you can literally stop for long enough to where they're going to stop bothering you. For Foster, now he's going to be popped a lot more. Now he's going to be someone that's always kind of like in the program and always looked at because you couldn't do the one simple thing. And he's still going to be a good player. This isn't like the thing to say like, oh, well, now I think he's going to be a terrible player and he's not going to be able to live up to the expectations because he wasn't trying hard enough and he's too, isn't focused enough on football. No. That'll be fine. Like, don't worry as much about that. But the point of the matter is, like, now with him having this test, now he's just going to have the spotlight on him more. Now he's going to be somebody that you better not be smoking weed because they're going to start testing you and they're going to look at you more and more and more for this. Like I said, is it anything that's detrimental to him long term? No. He's still coming from Alabama. He still gets probably the endorsement of Nick Saban, which is basically just him going over and basically saying, yeah, like he's really good. You probably got to watch him a little bit, but yeah, he's good. These character concerns or these questions of his character, like they're not as big as, someone who has like DUI or someone who has something that's like really major, right? Him and Joe Mixon, nowhere near the same thing. Both are quote unquote character issues, but they're not the same thing. So with that being said, we're going to take our next break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about the Oakland Raiders again really quickly, only this time it has something to do with where they're going to be to watch the NFL Combine. I'll give you a hint. It's not California. It's not Oakland. It's kind of a little bit east of there. That being said, we're going to take our last break and we'll be back here on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. All right, so one last thing as far as the NFL goes. We have the, like I said, NFL draft coming up. And, generally when you have the NFL draft, people like to kind of start it off, around the fans, right? If you're a Miami Dolphins fan, you're going to have it somewhere in Miami. If you're a San Francisco 49er fan, you're going to have it somewhere in San Francisco. If you are a Green Bay Packer fan, you're going to have it somewhere near Green Bay, right? You want the fans to come over, get to see the players, get to see important people with the organization, have some fun, get some wings, get some beer, stuff like that, have a day about it. Totally makes sense. The Oakland Raiders, they play in Oakland, right? We talked about this in the first segment, at least for 2 more years, right? 2 more years, they play in Oakland. And then they go to Las Vegas, right? So, NFL draft is on Thursday. Guess where the Vegas... I messed up the punchline. Shoot. Guess where the Raiders are playing? Las Vegas, right? They decided to play in Las Vegas. Or they decided to play in Las Vegas. They decided to have their draft party in Las Vegas. Why? Why did they decide to have it in Vegas? That makes no sense. You have 2 more years in Oakland. There's been a couple of weird things with the Raiders. Forget about this. You have the fact that the NFL is deciding to let them play one of their home games in Mexico City. Which I get they did that last year, but now you're for sure knowing the team is leaving. You have the fact of Derek Carr came out the other day and basically said, if you're a real Raider fan, you'll support us when we move to Las Vegas. And I get that he's kind of in a bad spot with that because what are you going to say? Yeah, if they leave, that's fine. No, you want them to stay. Still, it looks kind of strange. And now you have this with the Raiders basically deciding to have a draft night, a draft party night in the city that you're not in right now. I understand soon enough you're going to be that, but I was joking before that this is the metaphorical equivalent of your parents getting a divorce and all of a sudden your mom deciding to bring, this new guy Steve over to Christmas. No, I understand that you and dad are separating. I understand this isn't the same anymore, but no, you can't just all of a sudden bring Steve all of a sudden to this Christmas dinner and think everything's going to be okay. You can't just all of a sudden move the stuff to Vegas and think everything's going to be okay. We're not realizing the fact that, you have to come back to Oakland and say, hi, guys, remember us? Yeah, we're going to, come back in and play these last 2 seasons. Because it made me think about something. If the Raiders are bad next year, because there's no guarantee that they're going to be good, right? I understand that they were good last year. Derek Carr took a step, Amari Cooper, everything else like that. That part's great. But they've also been bad since basically 2003, right? There's more history than otherwise that they've been bad. So what if last year was just an anomaly, right? What if everything kind of broke right? You had Denver not as good of a team because they didn't have a quarterback situation, which, to be fair, they still don't. But what if the Raiders are bad next year? And I'm not saying 4-12 bad, but 7-9 bad, right? Bad enough to where they don't make the playoffs, and all of a sudden that momentum that you had goes away. What happens then? The reason why I point that out is if they struggle next year, and then you go into that final year in Oakland before they go to Vegas, and you know the team's going to be bad, why would you go? Give me a good enough reason why you would actually go watch the Raiders play in Oakland. Because Oakland has not wide-ranging fans of anywhere from, say, California to New York, but they're a popular enough organization, especially in the state of California, right? You have fans in the Bay Area, obviously, that are Raider fans, but you also have fans in Southern California, in Los Angeles, who are Raider fans as well. And if you are in Los Angeles and you are a Raider fan, why would you decide to go hundreds of miles north to watch the Raiders play one more time in an outdated stadium as opposed to waiting and going to see them play in Vegas, which is actually closer, even if you're where we are right now. Right now, Jeremiah and I and everybody else here at Golden State Media Concepts, we're in Sacramento, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where Oakland is, right, depending on traffic. We get it on local television. We can just watch it on CBS. Or if they're playing something else, on a Monday night, watch it on NBC or whatever else like that. Even if you're in Los Angeles, even if you're in Arizona and you're a Raider fan, you got DirecTV Sunday Ticket, you got the Red Zone, you got all these things where you can just watch it on TV. You can sit on the comfort of your couch. Like, why would you travel to Oakland to watch another game if they're that bad? Like, there's a solid enough chance that the Raiders are going to be a really bad team and no one's going to want to watch it that last year. And that's something they got to kind of figure out. Like, you could only, throw as much dirt on your fan base before they basically revolt and say, look, no, I understand this is an historic team and I love the Raiders or whatever, but no, I'm not doing this anymore. This is just stupid. Why are you going to keep doing all these mean things to the fan base? I get what Derek Carr did. I vaguely understand them going to Mexico City because you want to build a brand, you want to build a fan base or whatever. I guess I kind of get it. Another kind of close with Oakland and stuff like that. But this whole thing just seems mean, right? This whole thing seems kind of petty, right? Last time we were talking about the drug test that they have for the NFL Combine. The funny thing about that is, guess the day the NFL as a whole, I should say, guess when the first day that they're allowed to start randomly testing NFL players for drugs? 4/20, right? That just seems mean. The first day you can start testing for marijuana is on 4/20. That's just you just kind of being, mean and petty. And this whole thing with the Raiders in Las Vegas, this just seems mean and petty. You're literally... Also, one other fact that I forgot to mention, guess where it's going to be in Las Vegas? Literally in front of the Welcome to Las Vegas sign. The big sign, the one you see all the time in The Hangover or whatever kind of thing. Vegas. They show the big sign. That one. They're going to do it there. Why would you do that? It just seems mean and petty. And I understand you have to run a business, and I understand that there's things that you have to do in order to maintain morale, whatever else like this. But this doesn't seem like one of those. This just seems like something that they want to be in Vegas. They don't care that they're pissing off the fan base. They feel if you're a fan, you're a fan, you'll be a fan, and we can basically do whatever we want. I don't get it, man. I get that, there's been other teams, Washington is, a team that has a fan base that has, season ticket holders that they have, a giant wait list for. I understand that Packer fans are going to be Packer fans probably for life, no matter how good or bad they do. I understand that Cowboy fans are pretty much Cowboy fans for life because, you're invested in the team. But at the same time, this just seems like something that you're playing with fire a little bit because, yeah, a lot of them will probably still stay in Oakland. And honestly, the store will probably go away in a week and no one's going to care about it. But you can only push fans so much before they're basically okay, cool, so we're done. I was going to support you. I was going to have fun with this, but now, you've angered me enough to the point where I don't want to do this anymore. It just seems weird. So I saw this, one final thing before we actually end the show. I saw this little thing where it was talking about there's two teams, right? There are two teams that have no primetime games in 2017. Can you guess the two? Cleveland and Jacksonville. Obviously, no one really would care about those games, right? People aren't going to watch the Cleveland Browns because you're assuming they're going to be at best 3-13 this year, and you're not going to watch the Jaguars because even though they have, high draft picks and potential, you just assume they're going to be bad. But why don't you give them a bone? Why don't you throw them one bone? Just give Cleveland a game in week 9. Just give them one. Just to see if they can sink or swim. Just give them one game where it's just like, hey, how about this? And then you kind of like, oh, nope, never mind. Nope, sorry. That's my bad. Nope, sorry. I thought the dog was okay. I thought he liked you. Nope, I'm sorry he attacked your face. Nope, I'm sorry. It's the Browns. Sorry. I don't really see the point of not having them all. But, there's also that. I also saw where the Oakland Raiders picked up Khalil Mack's option because, of course. That should be a category where it's just like, oh, and also, duh. Because Khalil Mack's a 2-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro, Defensive Player of the Year freak in nature for the Oakland Raiders. They just picked up his 5th year because it's going to be cheap. The year after that, when he becomes a free agent, he's going to get all the money. And also, not for Oakland, because that's not generally how that works. If you make it to free agency, you generally don't sign back with your team. This isn't like the NBA where they basically give you free reign to, sign a big contract to stay with your team. If you make it to free agency, generally it's because you want to get a bunch of money, and that's going to go to a team that has a lot of salary cap, which means they're generally bad. He's probably going to go to a bad team. But at least for one more year, Oakland Raider fans, have fun. You got Khalil Mack. You're going to be playing Oakland. Just everything else is kind of Las Vegas-y. But with that being said, my name is Anthony, and you've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. Thank you guys. And Jeremiah, like I said, will be back Monday. I will be back Wednesday. You guys have a great weekend. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.